So we are rapidly going to move from local to global. So can I introduce Adam Lee, Senior Editor of Private Equity International, to moderate this next session. Thank you.
Great. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our panel session on when, how, and why European GPs go global. My name is Adam Lay. I am Senior Editor for Private Equity International based in London. And today we have with us 4 experts from the European private equity and private debt community here to share their insights, best practices, advice, and top tips for any GPs thinking about global expansion. So the aim of this panel is really, if you are a GP thinking of expanding abroad, what are some of the challenges and pitfalls that you should avoid, and how to go about that, and the different advice that the GPs that have done it can share with you. We'll end with some top tips, so please do stick around till the end, and you'll get some best advice from these 4 gentlemen here. Let's start with some very brief introductions. Maybe I can start with Klaas, and then move on. Everybody, if you could give a little brief introduction about yourself, how long you've been with your firm, and what your firm focuses on.
So I'm Klaas. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Nordic Capital, a upper mid-market firm. We've been around for 30 years. Our latest fund is 9 billion euros. We focus on tech, financial services, and healthcare investments. We were the first, I think, global buyout fund who launched a healthcare team. So sector-driven for a long time. That was since 1998. We have offices in the Nordics, Frankfurt, London, and New York, and a fundraising office in Seoul, Korea.
Hi everyone, Luke Finch. I'm a partner at HG and head up what we call the client services team. We are a European-focused B2B software and tech-enabled services investor. I've been at the firm for 13 years, and when I joined, we were managing sort of less than $5 billion and had offices just in London and Munich. Now we manage sort of over 50 billion, and we have offices in London, Munich, New York, and then most recently Paris and San Francisco.
Hi everyone, I'm Marc Frappier. I'm an executive board member at Eurazeo. Been with the firm for 16 years, and since I joined the firm, grew substantially. So we started off as a small office in Paris with about 30 people. We're now managing 32 billion. We're close to 500 people, and we have 12 offices across the world. So pretty active international expansion. We're focusing on mid-market, so I'm heading our mid-market buyout strategy, and we have strategies ranging from VC to growth equity and buyout, as well as credit, real estate, and infrastructure. So pretty broad offering.
Hi, I'm Rafael Torres. I co-run the private debt business within Muzinich, the pan-European one. We just focus on credit. We have 12 offices around the world. We have funds in Europe, in the US, and in Asia Pacific with 40 investment professionals around the globe.
Fantastic, thank you. So a wealth of experience to draw upon. Let's jump right in. Rationale. The Eurozone is clearly one of the largest economic markets in the world. Dozens of countries, many opportunities for a GP to expand their footprint. Vern Perry from Blackstone yesterday sat on this very stage and said that with the amount of product offerings in European private equity and alternatives, the future is very exciting for this region. So with so many opportunities here to capitalize upon, why would a GP want to kind of look abroad? Klaas, do you want to start off?
Yeah, our only investment activities outside of Europe is in the US, and we have ended up with the New York office very much from a pull perspective. I think some GPs I see, they seem to take another perspective. They make a strategic decision. We want to be in this country. We want to do this, or we want to launch a country-specific fund somewhere else outside their home region. For us, it's been much more of an organic journey. So we've been around for 30 years. Our first US investments came about as add-on investments. for existing European platform companies. And over the years, and that was in healthcare, which was, again, our first sector specialty that we had starting up in 1998. And did the first add-on investment in 2001. It was a very, very successful add-on to Nycomed, a Nordic pharma portfolio company that we had back then. And over the years, there's been more add-ons. We've gone to conferences. Slowly, deal flow has started to kind of get its own momentum. Did our first platform investment in the US in 2008. The next one after that was in 2014. So very organic and slow movement. But at some point, we just had so much deal work in the US, and it was all led from our healthcare sector speciality, especially in subsectors where we kind of found that we went from project to project to project. And at some point, it didn't make sense to just fly in people all the time for the work. And we opened up an office solely based on existing Nordic Capital employees that moved over. And then we've gradually expanded from that kind of landing base. So a bit of a land and expand strategy.
Thank you. And you mentioned the kind of push. During the preparation call for this, Luke, you were talking about the kind of push and pull different reasons for why a GP would want to kind of expand. Can you talk us through a little bit about what you meant by that and HG's experience?
Yeah, sure. So, I think if we go back in history, I think firms did say, well, let's put an Asia fund together or a Europe fund together if they're headquartered in the US. And maybe the driver there was actually sort of more fundraising. I think that's the wrong end of the telescope to look through these days. It has to be led by kind of deals and then a differentiation. What are you bringing to that market as a sort of potential new entrance? And at HG, we just do B2B software, tech-enabled services, like I said. We've been sort of busy in the US for our whole history, for 20 plus years. Very similar story to Nordic. Initially, we were kind of flying in, flying out, doing portfolio M&A. But increasingly in sort of areas where we really focus hard, tax and accounting software, parts of ERP and payroll software, we were meeting businesses that sort of wanted a sponsor that could help them come back across the pond and go from kind of the US and into Europe. And we felt a really relevant partner for them. And I think it has to be led by conversations with companies you want to partner with at the end of the day. And when we finally opened an office in New York 4 years ago, we sort of joked that it was the longest planned office opening in the history of private equity. It took us sort of 16 years to sort of finally do it. And we wanted to be very careful and tell the LPs this isn't a change of strategy. We're not going to the US to kind of pick a fight with a bunch of really good sponsors who have great reasons to win in their domestic market, but that actually in kind of 1 or 2 situations a year, we think we can make a difference and be the right partner for that company.
So for HG, it really wasn't about kind of raising capital from North American LPs or abroad. It was really deal-led.
Yeah, exactly. And we're doing it all within our pre-existing funds. So there's a sort of small carve-out within our funds to do deals in North America and, in fact, in sort of Australia, New Zealand, Canada. At one point in time, I think we were the most active sponsor in New Zealand, having done sort of 2 bits of portfolio M&A there in a 6-month period. But yeah, it's really led by the companies and not by the LPs.
And same for Nordic Capital. When I joined the firm 12 years ago, 2/3 of our capital came from the US. We had a very US-tilted LP base, but so the expansion of our portfolio work had nothing to do with fundraising.
And you also mentioned, Klaus, that actually since you broadened into the US, actually the percentage of LP capital in your funds has gone down, which is interesting. Mark and Raphael, I mean, would you agree in terms of it traditionally should be deal-led, or do you have different experiences in terms of you were looking to broaden your LP capital base? Maybe Mark first.
Yeah, I mean, there's 3 reasons why you would open an office internationally, sourcing and opportunities, LP relationship. But there's a third one, which actually where we started off, which is portfolio support. And interestingly, the way we built our international expansion has been eastward focused. So our first international office after Paris was Shanghai. And I was back 15 years ago where we're looking at how do we support companies, European-based companies, in their international expansion. One of the most attractive economies at the time was obviously China, and still is a very, very big market for us. So we open office in China, we built resources over there, and we've done the same thing in Latin America, for instance. And so by doing that, you're combining something that is really unique about our platform is for a mid-market player to have this network of international operating capability is a differentiating feature. And so we've decided then to import that in other markets. So what is the distinctive feature in Europe can actually be a distinctive feature in North America. And so we've opened North America about 6 years ago now, with exactly the same playbook as the one we've been using in Europe. And that has proven to be super successful. We have 2 teams investing over there. And so we move from supporting offices to investment offices.
Mm-hmm.
I would add, a couple of things really. It's market opportunity. I mean, for us, we started in Europe on the, private credit side. We then moved to the US. And, we've been following, Asia Pacific. And Asia Pacific today is a nascent market, at least in private credit. I mean, it's probably 1/10 of the US and, 1/5 of Europe. It's quite complex, okay? But it's very fragmented, so there's a lot of opportunity. So it's, market opportunity and also people, okay? Find the right person, with the right profile, with knowledge, particularly in Asia, which is extremely complex as a region. I mean, investing in Europe is, if we think it's complex because of the different jurisdictions, in Asia, I think it's exponentially complex, okay? Because even, within Asia, there are, different risk profiles, whether it is, Hong Kong, Singapore, or countries like Vietnam. So, I think for us, it was driven really by the market opportunity, the people we found, and also the demand from our investors, who know us, okay, and they wanted to diversify and expand, horizontally.
I mean, it's an interesting point. Obviously, international expansion, it's not just New York. There are other regions of the world, and we're going to get to that towards the end. But as you bring it up, Rafael, I mean, what other sort of challenges are there? And Mark, you have experience. Eurazeo has partnerships and offices in Asia Pacific as well. What other kind of challenges and problems do you face when you're looking to either open an office or expand into a region like Asia Pacific?
Well, I think the first aspect is you need to be willing to commit, for the long run, and especially, when we've opened that office in China, for instance, the business case was about supporting companies. So what's the effective payback for that? And so you're going to put teams on the ground, and you don't know exactly yet, if this is going to turn into fundamental value creation, which was the hope. And we've brought 30 companies since then in China. We've actually supported their organic growth. We built businesses from scratch over there, but also done a lot of M&A. And so there's been nice natural payback in the portfolio. But I think the best payback was by doing that consistently and being present over 10 years. It brought the attention of the Chinese sovereign wealth fund. So CIC turned to us and say, I need a European GP that has a capability to grow businesses overseas and notably in China. And so I'm willing to back you and build a fund together so we can jointly invest in European companies and grow these businesses into China. So that's the best payoff. And so it was a 10 years payoff. And so being willing to make that commitment. And one of the big benefit of the Eurazeo model is the platform has scaled today. We have this capability to fund those teams and support them, and eventually it's a very interesting payback, and that creates a big differentiating factor when we approach managers and entrepreneurs back in Europe, because we have something that others don't have, and that particular backing is extremely powerful.
I actually agree. I mean, for us, you have to be willing to make a long-term investment, okay, and that can be done. I think it's easier with private companies than public ones, and it's about scale as well. Do you have enough scale to be able to absorb effectively the investment, bearing in mind it will pay off in 7 to 10 years?
I mean, I think one of the interesting challenges we saw was cultural. How do we take what makes us sort of different in Europe and then keep that in the US and keep that point of differentiation. And some of that's sort of investment strategy, and that takes care of itself. But some of that's actually the style in which you conduct yourselves, the way you interact with founders and management teams. And we wanted to preserve that because what we observed is the US market's kind of very transactional. You know, there's a lot of deals happening. You know, you could sort of chase intermediaries, chase that. You know, and you know, we sort of joked it would be like sort of drinking from a fire hydrant. If you did that, you just wouldn't be able to manage it. So how do we take our culture of sort of nurturing relationships with management teams over long periods, really targeted, and then that led to sort of hiring decisions and staffing decisions. So we've ended up actually sort of, you know, starting both of our US offices with people moving across from Europe. So 5 or 6 people and a real kind of core at all levels of seniority, so that you sort of bring that culture to that market. And then you want to hire local experts who know the lay of the land. But we found that was the bit that took a lot of thinking. How do you marry your culture with, you know, the way transactions happen in that market?
It's I was going to actually ask you, Klaus, but it was Orlando Bravo sitting on this very stage yesterday who said, for a private equity firm, culture isn't the most important thing; it's the only thing. So when you think about international expansion, yeah, how exactly do you maintain your kind of sense of culture that the firm has taken so many years to kind of cultivate and maintain?
Yes, similar to HG, we opted for a model where we transferred staff from Stockholm, Helsinki, London over to New York. Big challenge there is the work visas. I mean, you need a certain proportion of local New Yorkers to get a work visa for the people you transfer in. So a bit of a challenge, but we managed to do it. And then over time, we've expanded with local hires. Then one big challenge for us was around attracting that top talent. I think firms can have different views on how and which profiles you want to recruit, but we have this kind of mindset at least that we're a very investment return focused firm. I think you can have different views on that, but in order to generate those type of returns, we need to have kind of the best and the brightest within certain areas that we recruit from. And how do you get that in New York? A hugely competitive market, not only for deals, but also for talent. The war for talent is kind of real there in a way that we're only starting to see in Europe in later years. And for us, the first pocket that we could tap into were stranded Scandinavians in New York. So people who had ended up at an investment bank or something there, married somebody local. So that was kind of our first pocket we penetrated. And then from there, I think we gradually grew a brand name as a good employer. And also we did some well-publicized deals that built our brand name. And now we're getting a fairly healthy inflow of resumes from pure born and bred Americans.
Have you found that not just in New York, but in other... just wait for this important announcement to finish. Very good. I was going to ask if you'd found this experience... Me too. Stranded Scandinavian niche. It sounds like a very interesting niche. And Luke, you mentioned also tapping the sort of British expat community as well. I mean, is that just done via sort of executive search firms or word of mouth, or is there a kind of a best way to kind of go about that?
Yeah, I mean, we use executive search firms. I think word of mouth. I think PE is not that big of an industry, so the word travels fast, and it's quite a rare occurrence when a Scandinavian firm pops up with an office. I think prior to us, it was only EQT that was in New York, so we just got those applications incoming.
But on your point on culture, and I fully agree with that. I think there's two things that we've experienced. I mean, first is obviously committing and showing strong commitment locally to attract talent. So I think the biggest move we've made is actually our CEO at the time relocated to New York. So she spent 4 years over there. So that's the biggest commitment you can show. And then starting doing deals and deploying capital as well. But I think eventually what is the best proof of the fact you're able to build something different with a proper culture? I mean, we've sent other team members and culture builders over there. But when we've made our first senior recruitment, with a local, a US citizen. What was really striking is he was leaving a firm that was a very successful firm, and I was interviewing him, and I told him, "Look, you have a great, trajectory. I'm actually, flattered that you come and consider joining us. So tell me what's the most attractive thing for you." And his answer was culture, and he said, "I'm not, in sync with my current firm culture, and what I'm seeing from the outside about what Eurazeo is as a platform." And the employer brand, which is something that we're marketing a lot with our portfolio companies, is actually reflecting very positively on ability to attract talent. Our positioning, Power Better Growth, is about making better businesses and having a progressive culture. And so we're an employer of choice also for attracting talent in North America with some specific people. And that was, to me, a aha moment. I said, okay, we got it. Now we have something that is well positioned and people understand. And the culture in North America is the same as in Europe. And so, I was there last week, and we had a new office opening event. And you feel so proud to have team members that can work on both sides of the Atlantic and sharing exactly the same culture, the same enthusiasm. So you need to make that investment and to really market your culture.
I mean, I think one thing we've found is quite appealing to people is well, come and work in London or in Munich for a year. So it's almost sort of do the opposite, which they don't often get the chance to do. And I think or if they do, it's sort of going to the satellite office versus coming to the head office. And so I think we found that's as we've sort of added more scale in North America, that's been quite a powerful recruitment tool in conjunction with culture. I think that I would agree with Mark that there are some people in US firms who don't quite fit that and want to come and work potentially with firms with a really long-term view or more specialized. I think that's the other thing that we're able to offer.
Yeah, I completely agree there. We almost, we don't want to say require, but we strongly encourage staff in the New York office, but also other offices to come and work in Stockholm, which is our hub. Half of our staff of 170 are based in Stockholm. We also travel a bit for conferences. Seems a bit archaic in this day and age of Teams, but so we have a big annual ski trip coupled with a strategy conference in January every year, and then a big conference in Stockholm. Everybody travels in. We have themes, workshops, and we spend a lot of time also talking about culture. What is our culture? Who are we? What do we do? What do we stand for? And I think that is helping. But it's still a challenge. I mean, New York is far from Europe. You constantly have to work on it.
Raphael, any last thoughts on the importance of culture and how you maintain that?
Yeah, I mean, it's you really have to move people around, within the offices to make sure that they get the DNA from the firm. I think one of the things that has helped as well, with COVID is, it's very easy today, even if you're not based in the US, to work on something in Europe. Okay, obviously, I think the teams on the ground need to be local and they need to understand the market very well. But actually, you can have a pool of resources which you can move around virtually. Okay, you don't need to be based, in Singapore to be working on something with the team who's looking at something locally.
I mean, it's an interesting point, isn't it? You mentioned this kind of virtual environment, and Klaus, you just mentioned the kind of the Teams era that we're in. I mean, in this kind of COVID environment where there's more kind of virtual interaction, surely it's more difficult to maintain a kind of culture globally within a firm compared to pre-COVID.
I'm not sure. I think actually, when we're staffing up a new investment opportunity, we will put people from across our offices on it. It might be led from one office, but they'll be working with colleagues in their kind of cluster team, in their subsector team from London and Munich. And I think, it's kind of, at the coalface that relationships are made and maintained, and being able to do that when you're working remotely, using Teams, using Zoom. We've actually found it, I think, it helps cement the culture rather than make it harder.
No, I
would
think
agree?
regular touch points is absolutely essential. I think from that perspective, Teams is super helpful. I mean, in the middle of COVID, we had daily calls actually with the teams to make sure everybody was fine. But when talking to China team and North American team, it's far away. I mean, we haven't been traveling to these destinations sometimes for over 2 years. So thank God, Zoom and Teams were there, so we can keep in touch and keep that link, and that worked very, very well. But then we've organized outings and trips together, and that's still the best thing you can do to create the bond and get the teams all together and create that sense of family. So at the end of the day, you still need those good times together.
Very good. Okay, I see we've only got a few minutes left, and I promised that we would end on some top tips from these experts here. So maybe we'll start with Raphael and then go through. What are your kind of top 1 or 2 pieces of advice for any GPs wanting to kind of expand their global footprint?
I think it's, you just have to make sure that you have enough scale, okay, that the market opportunity is there, okay, and you can, find the right people. I mean, for us, we don't control companies, okay. We don't, we follow investments, we support, sponsors and financial entrepreneurs we back, but we don't control them. So for us, it's more driven by the market opportunity, making sure, we find the right people who they have to understand the local market very well, but they have to fit within our culture.
And Mark?
Well, I think, the 2 of the fundamental tips are, being willing to commit long term and pay a lot of attention on your culture. That's the driver number 1 if you want to be successful. And that's the way we've been thinking. All our international expansion is really spending an awful amount of time, sending people, talking to people, and eventually recruiting the right talent. That's the absolutely key.
I would say it's differentiation. That's what we really cared about. What's our right to play in that market? Because your LPs are going to ask you that, the intermediaries are going to ask you that when you turn up, and the companies that you're speaking to are going to ask you that, and the people you're trying to hire. Why are you here? There's lots of domestic sponsors doing what you do. What can you do differently? And maybe that's culture. Maybe it's strategy, maybe it's a combination of both, but our sort of North Star on office openings has really been, what are we bringing that's not there already?
It's a differentiation. Class.
Yeah, chiming in with all of the previous comments, but know why you're expanding, know that you have an edge. Don't think of it as planting a flag. I don't think anybody is these days. I personally believe that the best reason to go is deal flow as opposed to product structuring or LP sourcing. So make sure I would probably gradually expand from that. And then culture. I mean, integrate. For us, we are working in 3 sectors, as I mentioned, and we work very sector-led. So we try to cross-staff a lot. And in the era of Teams or Zoom, it's really possible to cross-staff projects. So that's a huge integration tool, work together in cross-office teams.
Excellent. Well, some great advice and tips from the expert panel here. I think that's all we've got time for. So thank you very much for joining, and thank you very much for sharing your insights.
If there are any questions, we're just waiting for the next panel to arrive.
Excellent. I think we have one lady.
Thanks.
So good morning. Thank you for your contributions. I have a question concerning the strategy that you are realizing to be more local. Have you ever think to a combination between a transactional mindset and the participation to local cultural life? Means that sponsoring event, their museums, initiatives are to be more involved in the ESG program in the country. I'm saying that because I'm personally investing in the Indian market and setting up something there. And this is a great strategy to enter the market and to start to build a culture there. So I'm just sharing this question, understanding if you have think about this out-of-the-box thinking?
We don't have any museums or local art festivals that we're sponsoring yet, but actually we do in Switzerland, but that's another story. So I do believe you open a new office to be multi-local, right? So we talked a lot about cultural integration, I think all of us, because that is, I think, the main challenge. But as soon as you open an office, you do get a local anchoring in the local community. And yes, we do encourage our staff to participate in local activities. We have a charity fund. Each office can nominate, and we have a global committee. But we do make sure that we provide charitable contributions locally. Our ESG programs cut across all our portfolio companies, which tend to then cover a global footprint.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, and I think in any market you operate as a GP, you need to sort of you need to maintain that social license to operate, and that means giving something back. And what we put in place at HG several years ago is a foundation where we put % of our profits and a % of our carried interest into that, and then that donates meaningfully to a handful of charities in the educational sector in the areas we operate. And so we've picked charity partners in France, in Germany, in the UK, obviously, but also in the US. Ultimately, we want to be building the software engineers and the workforces for future HG portfolio companies. So there's hopefully a circularity here that our companies will take kids and students off of those programs into the companies themselves. But yeah, very much so. I think if it's about commitment, isn't it? If you're committing to that market, you're committing to it in its totality.
Ecosystem. Yeah.
We've got time for one more quick question.
Thank you. Really interesting panel. I just had a question around communications with LPs. So clearly all of your firms are very established in terms of kind of being global now, but for kind of more kind of European firms, at what stage should they look to communicate their plans to go global to their investors?
Yeah, I mean, I think, our view is you can never sort of communicate too much with your LPs, and I think if you've got a good reason to do something and you believe it yourself and you're putting money and resources to work as the GP to do it, then tell your clients sort of why and what you're planning. Our sense is that LPs, they just want to understand sort of what you're doing in that market, and does that change how they should view you or benchmark you or who your competition might be. But I think as long as you've got good answers for that, then there's sort of no better time to communicate than kind of once you've decided.
I think opening an office is always a challenge, also from the client perspective. And thinking about North America, a few years back, people were questioning why would European firms go there. People would not question why North American firms would do private equity in Europe, but the other way always seemed very challenging. I think we don't get that question anymore. I think we've all proven that it's pretty fierceful competition in Europe. The skill set that you develop in Europe is actually replicable in North America and creates an edge in North America. So I think now it's easier for people to understand why we're going there. But at the time, we had a lot of questions, and we spent a bit of time explaining to our clients why we thought it was a good thing to do. But we still faced skepticism at the time. But we're glad we did it. And same thing with China.
And just generally adding to both of these comments, but chiming in here with Luke also, I think I encourage every GP to develop a transparent communication culture with your LPs. It always pays off. I wouldn't necessarily be quiet and then pounce on them with huge things. It's about communicating a lot of the things you do all the time. Starting with your LPAC, we use our LPAC to test ideas. When we expanded, we tested it with LPAC for a couple of times before. When we launched our lower mid-market fund, that was a kind of 2-year testing process where we kicked around ideas, and then a lot of the LPAC members ended up seeding the fund with us. So it's an open and transparent culture towards your LPs. Big encouragement from me.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the questions, and thank you for the panel for staying on to answer them. But we do have to now swiftly move on. But join me in thanking them again now. Thank you.
Thank you.